For me, when I'm editing, and I can apply this all the way to when I was a high school art student, majority of your work when you're by yourself is on such a macro level. You're examining it, you're obsessing over it, you're trying to shape the clay, you use your pencil to shade something to make it pop or really refine an edit. When you step away and you look at it as a whole, suddenly that real specific moment, it works in the whole piece.
Hey, everybody. This is Josh Apter from Manhattan Edit Workshop. This is a hybrid sort of sight, sound, and story / Talking MEWShop. We do a lot of interviews where we talk to creative professionals. Manhattan Edit Workshop is a school that's been teaching the how and why of editing for over 20 years in Chelsea, Manhattan. So this is the fun part of the job where we get to talk to editors about how they got started, their creative experiences, and yeah, it's always like a nice way to, this is the first thing I'm doing this week because it was Memorial Day weekend. So this is like a nice bonus for me to start off doing something I really enjoy. So welcome Eric Litman to the hybrid podcast, I guess, if I call it.
Thank you for
And
having me. It's a pleasure being here.
yeah, and it's always going to be informal. We got a couple talking points, and nothing that we can't cover. But I did want to ask if it's possible that we were born in the same hospital, because I know you're from Philly and you're from Abington, and
Yes.
I was born in Abington Hospital.
I was born there. Yes.
I wondered. I'm slightly older than you. I was born there in 1971. So, but I've been back and forth there. I grew up in Fort Washington and Ambler.
That's where
So,
I grew up. So
yeah.
I guess you went to, where'd you go to high school?
So I got sort of, we call it counseled out now, but I was kicked out of Fort Washington Elementary School.
Oh, wow.
And I went to a sort of creative school called Oak Lane Day School, where you like played in the mud and did arts and crafts. And it was like that was how a kid like me learned. Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Upper Dublin, but speaking of Oak Lane, that is a blast from the past. I was a rambunctious little kid, and
Hmm.
I remember being sent there for either after school programs or summer camp when I was very, very young. Oak Lane Day School Camp.
Hmm.
And it was a very if I'm speaking like I remember this in detail, but I do know it was a very creative school, and I think it helped direct me as a very young child to the arts. Growing up, I was actually much more involved in painting and drawing, a little bit of sculpture, and up until my early college career, that would have been the direction that I thought and most people thought I'd be heading into.
Wow. Yeah, that's there was a guy, Armand Mednick was his name. He taught like you would do clay and like
Yeah.
like throw pots. It's like that. That is the earliest memory of my interest in art. And I think part of the reason, like you, part of the reason I'm doing what I do today is because it was really supported. Like the science teacher would teach frequencies by plugging in his electric guitar and showing it in a waveform monitor. And it
Oh,
was like,
wow.
yeah, it was better for me, better fit for me than the public school system. I didn't last. Like I got booted in second grade. So I never made it to Sandy Run. I never made it to Upper Dublin. It
Well,
was funny you mentioned that.
I went through the whole school program there, and very fortunate. I actually met some really good art teachers of mine through my grade school career that really helped shape and direct me where I ultimately went.
That's terrific. And then you went to, I mean, we usually talk about sort of how you got started. So I know you went to Tyler, or did you go to Temple undergrad with more of a focus in the arts?
I went to Temple undergrad. So when I was in high school, the majority of my high school career would have been focused on uh, painting, drawing. I was a very serious art student growing up. And when I was applying for various schools, I, I was offered a number of art scholarships to various different schools. And for whatever reason, I always had a love for film, filmmaking. Like everybody, when you're young, you think you want to be a director. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And somehow one thing led to another. I narrowed it down to a few different schools, and I decided I wanted to forego the art scholarships and go to Temple because they, at the time, and then they still do, they had a really good film and communications program. And I went through all the film classes. I learned all the various aspects of filmmaking, and somewhere in there, I got bit by the editing bug. I don't know how it happened. I think I just sort of stumbled into the computer lab one day, and I was always very good with computers. That was sort of I was pretty good with that stuff, and to see that I could cut at the time was very rudimentary, very early Premiere, or they think they had a Media 101.
Mhm.
We had one Avid, and it was so exclusive and elite to the grad students. I don't think I ever touched it. It was one of those things like you had to get special permission to do. And I thought I was so cool running around with my jazz drive, my 1 gigabyte jazz drive, plugging it into Adobe Premiere. I mean, I'm seriously dating myself right now, but I thought it was just such a cool way of editing. And then they had film labs there, and I would dabble a little bit in actually cutting film, 16 millimeter, shooting with like the Bolex and changing the film underneath the tarp, and then cutting it on a flatbed. And I really, at the time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just thought it was interesting, and I didn't understand what one image juxtaposed against another image, what that was really doing. I just found it interesting. Um, and when I was there, I was very fortunate to learn under under a teacher there, a professor. Um, I'll give a shout out, Alan Barber. He was a very influential teacher to me, and he encouraged me one summer to participate in the Temple University internship program. Come out to LA, intern somewhere, and see what you think. And I ultimately ended up interning for Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free, when they were in post on the first Gladiator. And one of the things we did, one of the things that Alan Barber had us do was he would take us to various grad schools. Being a teacher, he found education being very important, and he took us to a number of schools, USC, UCLA, various schools like that. And he took us to, at the time we were a small group of students, and he took us to AFI, the American Film Institute. And that place just blew my mind away. I was so, I thought that was such a cool place. It was a conservatory for film students. At the time, it was the only film school that I knew of that would give you a specialized degree in a specific discipline. And I sort of knew at that time, though I never really spoke it out loud, that probably directing wasn't where I was going to go. I always had this special interest in editing, uh, but I just didn't really understand what I was totally doing at that point. Um, Flash forward a number of years later, I apply to AFI and I get in and
Mhm.
for editing.
Congratulations, by the way. That's a very selective program. I have a
Thank you.
close
Thank you.
friend from Ridley who went there, and she was a flight attendant prior to that. And she and her sister and I worked at a production company way out in Primos. It was like some college job, and she was
Yeah.
kind of bit by the bug too, but like on a lark, got in and went down the producing track, and her film won an Academy Award, her short
It's
film out of
incredible.
AFI. I mean, it's just like one of these like Cinderella stories, but I remember her saying like half the people aren't even asked back year two. Like it's not just hard to get in, it's hard to stay in.
It's a very it's a very competitive grad school. It's very difficult, and part of their reasoning for doing that is they're preparing you for the film industry.
Mhm.
Uh, They really work you there. Long hours, demanding work, demanding people, and but also very encouraging to creative discussion. We would shoot films or shoot our little movies on. We would start on video, and then ultimately we would work up to uh, film. But over the course of the 2.5 years I was there, whenever we shot something, everybody was always had to go up and present their work, and then as a group we would dissect it. What worked,
Mhm.
what didn't work, and what you're learning about film language, but also you're learning how to take criticism and how to utilize that criticism, because not all criticism, because sometimes it can be hard to hear, and you have to
Mhm.
understand how to take that and utilize it to better your film. And that's also a skill that they teach you there.
Yeah, there was I went to film school also, and you would critique, and like you could always tell the people who are immediately defensive. And it's like that's not the point, isn't for you to stand up and defend your film. It's to, you know, understand, well, some of the criticism is like personally, like you to understand what's valid, what's sort of like irrelevant stuff, like, oh, I would have done it in, in black and white. And you're like, well,
Sure.
some of that stuff. But there's also, if you understand, like, I guess to me, what I noticed watching it in front of a group of people is I could tell what was wrong through them. It was and as an
Yes.
editor for years, I saw that phenomenon occur over and over again. It's like you feel like you don't have distance from a project, and suddenly screening it for a group of people, you feel it through the audience, and it's like, oh my God, is that? Oh shit! It's like it becomes so obvious what isn't like rhythmic or what arc isn't working, and then also some pleasant surprises. You're like, wow, I always thought that was funny. I didn't realize it was that. Like people laugh at something, and they have a bigger reaction.
Yes, of course, and we all experience it, including myself. And it's how you. I always once you sort of pick yourself up from whatever negative criticism you get, you had to sort of realize you had to sort of learn how to utilize that feedback and weed through all the criticism and just take the crux of the note. What was that note? What were they trying to tell
Mhm.
you? And I utilize that skill to this day in my work today. And it's fascinating when you screen something. This still happens to me now. You screen something for somebody, and prior to you screening something for somebody, you feel very confident about it. You think it's going to be great, and suddenly you hit play, and it could be one person in the room or 20, and suddenly all the good and the bad come to you real
Mhm.
fast, and you see it as clear as day. It's a fascinating thing about editing and screening your work for people, because they don't even have to say anything to you. You just see it.
Mhm. Yep. No, it's great.
Very
I would have these cute, like these forms for people to, give feedback. And I'm like, I don't even need it. Like, I know exactly what's wrong.
Yeah.
It's an amazing phenomenon, but I think it was, I was like, I don't know, what was the second feature I cut? And I was just like, we were cutting and banging our faces against this thing for a couple months. And he was taking his kids away for spring break. His kids were in school or something. And thankfully, because it was like 2 weeks, we came back and sat down and we
Yeah.
became an audience to the film again. And just that break was so, it wasn't that we screened it publicly. It was just like, we got to like we were so micro with the thing that to be able to just sit down. And the first thing we did was just watch them. We're like, oh, okay. I get it now. Like, and it just, those experiences are really, it's very hard to explain that to an editor until they experience it themselves, that these weird magical experience things happen, right? Like,
It's just it's a weird, it's a yes, like you said, it's magical. It's such a unique experience, because for me, when I'm editing, and I could imply this all the way to when I was a high school art student and I would do still lifes. You're you're working on majority of your work when you're by yourself is on such a macro level. You're looking so closely at something. and you're examining it, you're obsessing over it, you're trying to, you know, shape the clay, you use your pencil to shade something to make it pop or really refine an edit. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't work, or you can't figure out how to crack it and make it work for a whole, and you step away, or like how I would do as a young student, I would step away, I would step back from my sketch, and you look at it as a whole. And suddenly that real specific moment, it works in the whole piece. And it's just an interesting way of looking at something. Or if you step away, you quickly see what the problems are.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's what I love about editing. And
Mhm.
the other thing that an editor that I assisted earlier in my career told me, and I believe this to this day, and I utilize this when I get stuck. I utilize this all the time. He said to me that editing is a language, much like English, Spanish, French. You're speaking in film, and one cut to the next is saying something, and you have to learn what that language is. And like with all languages, there's rules. There's how do you form a sentence? You need to have I'm the wrong guy to ask about that, but there's certain rules to construct a sentence, and once you understand those rules, you can start bending them, you can start breaking them, you can start
Yep.
formulating new ways of, you can use slang, and that also applies to editing. And it's just,
Mhm.
again, it's the things I love about this craft.
It's a great point because it's like I remember being really like I was just a devout Hitchcock. Like the construction was like
Yeah,
is amazing to see someone that had innovated, not just used the techniques, but created so many of them, and just the idea of shot sizes and editing rhythms and then I don't know where I was. I must have been in school when I first saw Godard breaking every rule that I held
yeah,
so sacred, or Cassavetes, who's back there. I remember seeing this movie at the Anthology Film Archives and saying, this doesn't make any sense. And it's completely engrossing.
yeah,
Or even Husbands and Wives. It was just like, what's this guy do? Because he evolved. Woody Allen's movies were like sort of a one, sort of like he got into doing these long shots that really told a lot of the story without a lot of editing. And then he does
hmm,
a sort of a fake documentary that's, it's all over the place.
yeah,
But if you understand, I think it's about fluency and whether it's painting or sculpting or playing an instrument, like if you understand, if you understand the sort of, like you're saying, like Picasso didn't go right into, his blue period. There is
yeah.
right? Like the idea of learning the rules to understand when it's okay to break them to your
That's
advantage.
absolutely. Early days of AFI when I was there, because most of the people that get into AFI when they've already worked in the industry or some
Hmm.
aspect of the industry for a number of years. That's when I went there. That's sort of what AFI wanted. They wanted you to have some career experience and
Hmm.
then transition into a graduate school. So some of the things I would see for people in that first month or so is they would have a hard time going back to the basics. They would say, "Well, I've done X, Y, and Z. Why am I learning film 101?"
Hmm.
And what I would say to some of my close friends that would say this to me, because I would feel that too, but you sort of go, "Well, I'm here. I got to embrace what they're teaching." And I would utilize my education as an art student, and tell them every year when I would go to my different art class, intro, beginner, ultimately at honors, and they do the first week or two is always the same thing: draw a circle, draw a square, draw a triangle. It's actually much more difficult than you think, and it's breaking you down, learning the basics, and applying that to whatever terrific work you're going to ultimately do.
Ridley Scott sort of at the beginning and then at Dope Thief, right? This was a connection that sustained, or was it like you had that experience and then left that experience and then came back and like, I worked with you a bajillion years ago?
I worked for one summer when they were in post on Gladiator. I was an unpaid intern. Um, I had a terrific time there. I didn't, I was a guy in the vault that, Eric, go pick us up, X, Y, and Z. And in the
Mhm.
meantime, I would read scripts all day. That was the extent of my work there.
No lunches with Ridley during the internship.
No lunches with Ridley. I saw Ridley once walking in the hallway, and we gave each other a nod. And it,
Mhm.
it was a big moment for me. I don't forget things like that.
Mhm.
Um, no, I didn't. It wasn't a relationship that blossomed into future work. A, a few years ago, I saw in the trades they were doing a show called Hot Zone Anthrax. And I found it fascinating. I thought the subject material was interesting. I remember the anthrax attacks very well. And I reached out to them. We had some mutual friends. I reached out to them, took an interview, and ultimately got the job. Cut the premiere for that season and a number of episodes. And it was just a very rewarding experience working with everyone over there. I found that my sensibilities matched their sensibilities. We seemed to have appreciation for each other's work. They were, we wanted to tell similar stories. As all jobs do, that one came to an end. I did a few other jobs in between. I got on to Netflix's One Piece, which I did season one, and I'm back now on season two. And about a year or two ago, I think it was 2 years ago, I saw again in the trades, they were doing a show called Dope Thief. And I vaguely remember the book. I know it was a New York Times bestseller. And it took, all I saw was Dope Thief, Philadelphia, Ridley Scott, Peter Craig. And I went, that sounds very interesting. I really want to get involved in a show like this. I would love to do a show that took place in Philadelphia. Reached out to them, got an interview, met with Peter Craig, met with my director, Marcella Saeed, hit it off with them. And they originally brought me on to do one episode, which was episode four, Philadelphia Lawyer. And then we had the strikes actually happened. So we had a big break in between. And when the strikes resolved and production resumed, people's schedules shifted, other things happened, and they asked me to do two more episodes. And incredibly thrilled for more opportunity to work with them.
You have a ton of work prior to. I don't want to jump all the way ahead because you've got 40 episodes of Agents of Shield under your belt,
I
and I
do,
mean,
yeah.
you were doing features and episodic. But did you start doing? You started in features and or always did both?
I did both. I did a number of features. I actually worked on Final Destination
I
5.
saw that. Yes.
And when 3D was the big thing at the time, I was an assistant on that. I learned a ton from the people that I worked with on that. I learned just really, everybody on that picture was just extremely hardworking. Really cared about everything they were doing. In the grand scheme of things, it's like this kind of silly horror movie, and
Mhm.
but it was a lot of fun. It was just, you're working on something that's just so cool, and then there's this new element of 3D that we were utilizing. I
Mhm.
can't say I enjoyed every night at the end after you screen the film print, the 3D print, the mono print, the stereo print, the IMAX print. Your eyes are sort of bleeding at the end of the night because you're just like, oh
Mhm.
my God, that's my head hurts
Seems
from looking.
appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, but but at the end of the day, you're sort of like, wow, that was a cool experience. I worked on various shows. I worked with a lot as assistant. I assisted a lot of very experienced editors, 35, 40-year veterans. Um, and I learned a lot from all of them. And it was such a valuable experience to come up that way. Some people just jump right into it and they figure out their own path. I felt it was important for me to learn from some of these, from all of the editors I assisted, and to see how they dealt with certain aspects of the pressures of the cutting room, the goods and the bads. And it was an incredibly invaluable experience. After doing all that, yes, I somehow landed an interview just by chance on Agents of Shield, and at the time it was Marvel's first foray into television. They were trying to have a synergy with the movies, and there was a lot of eyes on that show. It was you know, Joss Whedon directing, producing, and it was a big show. Wonderful people. I was there for a long time.
I mean, it's funny because um, it's almost like the generation, you're not that old, but like the apprentice like the experience of coming up as an apprentice and having these mentors isn't all but over now, but I do think it's harder to have that. Like it was just sort of a given, you would come up as, underneath other editors and, they'd say, get out of here and kick you out and you'd go and, find your fortune as an editor. But it seems
Hmm.
great to have, you cut on film, which probably a lot of people coming up now have no idea about, which I
Yeah.
think teaches its own part of the discipline in terms of permanence and thinking through ideas, versus just throwing everything against the wall because there's so many options. But was Agents of Shield like your Beatles in Germany, where you got your? It seemed like you did so. I mean, or did you feel a sense of confidence going into it? Because I know there are people that are like, it was 8 years before I really felt like there was nothing you could throw at me I couldn't edit. 8 years before that happened with them. And maybe that's different for other people, but what was it like for you getting that level of experience over that time?
uh, that's interesting. You know, I would say Agents of Shield when because I at that point in my career, like most editors at that point in their career as well, they bounce back and forth. They make the transition, then they have to go back down. And so I did that a number of times just for necessity of work.
Mhm.
It's a little different. Getting work then was a little different than it is now, and it wasn't as you sort of just took what came your way because you just wanted to work, and that's how I've always operated. So when I did land the job for Agents of Shield, I did not let go. I knew this was a gem because it was Marvel, because we it was a giant visual effects show, but also it was on network TV. We were going up against air dates. So what I learned on that show was speed. Uh, I had to I had to do what I had to cut stuff quickly uh, and confidently and deliver to whomever I was delivering to because we just didn't have the luxury of time.
Mhm.
And that could be high pressure sometimes, but also it can be a lot of fun, especially when you have lots of you have a great team surrounding you and great producers and directors giving you wonderful material. And it doesn't hurt when you have like a big giant superhero or you know Ghost Rider or car chases, action sequences. I cut and I could segue into my work on Dope Thief or other shows I worked on. When I worked on Marvel, I cut a lot of action sequences, a ton. Uh, 40 episodes, you know, at least 2 to 3 giant action sequences each one of those episodes.
Wow.
You can do the math. So it was a lot. And one of the things because it's Marvel, you have a superhero fighting against another superhero or whomever. Those action sequences are very, mano a mano. You're in the person's POV. You're sort of in it. And on Dope Thief, a lot of times, what the approach I would take on the action sequences is I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to be a spectator. I wanted our characters to be a spectator and unwilling participants, I guess you could say. And in one of my episodes, there's a big quarry shootout, and the way it looked to me to put that together was fog of war. Manny and Ray just don't want to be here, and they're not going to be participating in shooting whomever or throwing Molotov cocktails at whomever. They just want to get out of there in the worst possible way. And
Well, you should.
that was a very interesting way for me to. It was exciting. It was it was a breath of fresh air to do something like that because it was very different than some of the other action scenes that I've cut.
This is something that you get to talk about when you're sitting down with I guess you're working with the director of that episode first, and then ultimately you're working with the showrunner producer. So at the initial stage, you're like, well, let's look at this like they don't want to be. Let's back away from this instead of being like right inside. Or do they come to you with the same? Like, how do those ideas evolve on a show like Dope Thief?
What's great about a lot of the shows I work on is we have a tone meeting before the episode's shot, and I find as an editor those types of meetings incredibly valuable. My take on a meeting like that is I just want to be a fly on a wall. I want to hear what they want to do. I want to hear what their goals are. I want to hear what the director, how the director intends to shoot this, what she hopes to get out of it, and ultimately I want to hear what the showrunner or the producers what they're hoping to achieve. Once I hear everybody's goals and what the intent is, then I can start formulating my intent based on what their vision is. And I vaguely remember somebody saying in a tone meeting, fog of war. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, confusion. We don't need to necessarily spell everything out. A doesn't need necessarily to B here. We can maybe go to A to D and then get back to B, if that makes editorial sense. And I thought that was a really interesting way of intent for a sequence like that. So when I started cutting that scene, which they shot over a number of days, I sort of leaned into the horrors on their faces, Ray and Manny, Brian Tyree Henry and Vakamura, their faces to really give us the terror of what's happening. It didn't hurt to cut to a guy who set himself on fire because he dropped a Molotov cocktail. That footage, when I saw it, really was like I was so impressed with what I was looking at. I don't think I could ever think of a sequence of any fight sequence that I've worked on where they set somebody on fire practically and numerous times from take to take.
Oh my
So
God.
I knew when I was getting this footage, this was just going to be really next level, high caliber material. And again, it was just a lot of fun. So when I did deliver that sequence, yeah, you're a little. I hope this is what they want. I hope they see what I'm seeing. I hoping this was their vision, and they loved it. They loved what they were looking at. And one of the things working with when I ultimately started working with Peter Craig, the showrunner, one of the things we talked about was, do we need to explain ever so slightly where the shooters are, where the snipers are? And what we sort of did was at like layers of a quarry as the firefight progressed, we slowly moved our way out of the quarry to explain the different levels of who's attacking them, who's above them, who's below them. And it was just this interesting way to explain that stuff.
That's and he's like, guy's kind of I don't want to say in a good way. He's a good monster, but he's got a lot of credits under his belt. This is seems like and it'd be a great conversation just for anyone to be a fly on the wall, just to sort of figure out the language, and the sort of the way that scenes are going to come together. It must
Yeah,
have been a really fun, just like, and it's Philly. I love when a show is shot in a place, so I could imagine it there's a texture and a
yeah.
feeling to it that wouldn't, like, I don't know where you would can't shoot Vancouver for Philly, right? Like it's
You
something that,
could, you put City Hall everywhere, so, or Liberty
yeah.
Bell. That's what they
Mhm.
generally do when they shoot outside. Uh, for me, it was very special for a show to be shot in Philadelphia in actual areas that I knew very well.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of times I would get dailies and I would look at a scene. I know this looks kind of familiar to me. I'd quickly run to the call sheet. Where did they shoot this? Oh my God, they shot this, they shot this here. I used to drive by the street all the time and I recognize this location. It's been a number of years since I lived in Philadelphia, but the sequence in episode 7 where Mina ambushes Michelle in the coffee shop and to talk to her, try to reason with her about what her plan is. I'm cutting that scene and I'm like, this area looks familiar to me. I'm not quite sure where it looks different, but similar. And I ran to the call sheet. I'm like, oh, well, this coffee shop used to be a bank, and I used to drive by this bank all the time. I know exactly where this is, and
Mhm.
so that was very rewarding and fun to be a part of. It definitely made me homesick a number of times, but it was a career milestone for me to do something like that.
But I love the well, both characters. I'm like, first, you know, Paperboy from Atlanta, right? Is like that was kind of just one of those shows, like really an unforgettable experience watching that series. Um,
Yeah, Brian Tyree Henry, who played who was in Atlanta and plays Ray in Dope Thief. He's just an incredible actor. He is so expressive with his eyes. He could tell a whole story just with his eyes,
mhm,
and it was that was such a great way to utilize dictating the edit because he could tell so much. And then also everybody in the show, Brian and Wagner, who played Manny, they just gave such intensity to the performance, and they could deliver. They were able to calibrate the performance to be very high intensity, to low intensity, to
mhm.
rapid firing exchanges, to very very minimal exchanges depending on what the scene is. And that coupled with the fact that they also had terrific ad lib skills. They would improv sometimes. And you didn't want to use all of that because you have to tell the story, but as a period to a scene or something add a little levity to an intense moment. These the their ad libs were invaluable at times.
I remember I was like, I've seen him before, and I couldn't remember. And it's finally Civil War,
Yes. Yeah.
and his performance is he's not doing or speak. It's like it's all his face. And
Yes.
the sort of like gravity and sympathy and awe and sadness, and there's so much going on in his character without it being verbally explained. And that's sort of, you get two of those people. It must have been like dailies must have been like opening Christmas presents every day. It's like,
It was incredible footage to work with. Very, very rich and just about everything you could ask for.
mhm,
Uh, there was there was really no wrong direction to go in, which could also be challenging in of itself because you just want to use everything and you have to sort of find your way and figure out what's the best way to tell the story of the scene. What is the emotional crux of the scene? What's the arc of the scene? Whose scene is this? And once you sort of figure that out and dissect the scene prior to cutting it, or I would have wonderful conversations with my director, Marcella Saeed. Uh, and we would discuss this stuff. I would send her scenes at the end of the week of what I cut that week, and then we would discuss it. An incredibly collaborative experience, and we could see pretty quickly we were both in sync in terms of what we were looking for. And when you have material like that, it just made things a lot easier, but also more complicated at the same
Mhm.
time.
Right.
You
Sometimes
know,
when you don't have a lot of options, it's sort of like, here's what we got. And like,
here's what you got. Yeah, this
yeah.
one is, well, I can go here. This is good. I can go here. This is good. And each one is
Mhm.
saying something different. When we were delivering the initial cuts of the episodes, they were coming in at 70 to 90 minutes long, which is that's too long for what we wanted. So we had to figure out interesting ways to still tell that story, but now make it more pointed, more directed. And
Mhm.
we have like a sculpture, we'd be shaving it down and trimming and uh, molding the piece into what we wanted. And it was just a fascinating way to work, and fascinating way to
Mhm.
edit something that was so long, but so packed full of story to ultimately get
Sure.
to where we were and still retain that story. It was a very interesting process and fun, very fun.
That sounds great. And were you cutting? This is the kind of, I don't know if they all do it this way. Was this episodes coming out one after, you weren't cutting on that kind of deadline? You cut the entire series and then the series came out, or were you cutting as they were releasing? It wasn't, I don't, right? That's not how Apple does it.
No, so I was one of four editors of the show, and I originally came on to do episode four. So when I came on, episodes one, two, and three were in various stages,
Mhm.
uh, and I knew one of the other editors, Jennifer Barbeau. I worked with her many years prior. We've stayed in touch, and she cut episode two. So naturally, I called her since I had a good rapport with her. And I called her. We discussed how the show was going, who these characters were, what her experience was, what was the feedback she was receiving, uh, and and episode she cut episode two. I thought it was terrific. I loved that episode. Um, and then I called Billy Rich, who cut the pilot, and we spoke about the same conversation. And again, the pilot was both these episodes were very much in flux at that time. The pilot was terrific, uh, and then um, I have this personal thing where I generally don't like to read beyond what I'm cutting. Uh, I want to be able to be I want to be able to be a fan once I see it.
Mhm.
And I know once I read it, I'm not going to have that opportunity. So my barometer of what I think is working and what might not be working for the show as a whole might be tainted at that point. And so I try to stay away from that, but also I don't want to influence my edit too much about something that may happen in the future. I try to keep my episodes grounded and stand on their own 2 feet. So watching everything leading up to that is important. Watching beyond, I generally stay away from. So when I did watch the episodes beyond the episode that I initially cut, I was able to be a fan,
Right.
get a sense of what the audience is going to, how they're going to respond, and then able to calibrate that to what I'm ultimately doing at that point.
And then there
Uh,
were two more that you cut, right?
and then there was two more that I cut. So we had a strike. There was a number of strikes. So we did, after once I delivered, I think, producer's cut of episode four, we all had to shut down for a period of time. And then when the strikes resolved, they brought me back and they said they wanted me to do episode seven. And then I was going to have to take over episode three, since now people's schedules had shifted and such. So, but what was interesting about that was the arc of the story from Peter's perspective had shifted a little bit. He
Mhm.
wanted he wanted to make certain aspects of of the story more pointed, more directed. And we added this layer of the alliance. Who is the alliance? What are they all about? And how is this all connected? So it shifted the story a little bit. We went back, they shot a few more scenes for some of the episodes that had already been shot. Episode 3. Um, the Malik torture sequence was a new scene that they shot, um, and then which was again another horrific scene that when I saw the dailies and what they actually did in that sequence, it takes a lot to sort of stun me. And when I saw what they were able to do practically, it caught me off guard in a very good
Mhm.
way.
Right.
I
And
won't
you've got
spoil it.
Final Destination. I mean, and like from like not hard, it's not easy to shock you.
It's I've seen a lot, so yes, that one I just figured it was going to be. I knew what they were going to do. I just figured they were going to do visual effects, and then they did it, and went, "Oh wow, okay, pretty cool." Um, but then also what we had to do is because now the story had shifted, and episode 3 is sort of a pivotal episode because it's going to we're now responding to all the fallout and the heist and etc. So this is sort of going to direct where the rest of the series is going to go. So two challenges that we had were the opening of the episode. We wanted to make sure that people understood where our characters were emotionally after 2 episodes of horrific events that have happened to them. They were criminals, but now they're unwilling participants. They're becoming the victims of their heist, and they're trying to get themselves out of it. And they also have to protect all their loved ones because their crimes can affect everyone they care about. So we had to figure out. So when we started to get back into the beginning of episode 3, we wanted to create that sense of fear and paranoia in Ray, and we grabbed footage from various episodes and we created a little mini montage at the opening of Ray having a fever dream basically and terrified. Where's his brother? Where's Manny? And we were able to steal footage of Ray in the storage locker, and then he's having a dream and he stuns himself like, "Where are you, Manny?" And Brian Tyree Henry actually came into the cutting room. He recorded a whole bunch of ADR for us on the
Mhm.
iPhone. He was just phenomenal at doing that. And we put that sequence together, and then I realized, oh, I think I ripped this off from The Fugitive. This whole sequence, which we all laughed about. I was like, well, if you know anything about The Fugitive, that movie was a troubled production.
Mhm.
They all sort of thought that wasn't going to go anywhere, and it ended up being a huge successful movie. I believe it won an Academy Award for editing. And
Mhm.
so the joke was, well, if you're going to steal from somebody, steal for
Right.
something great.
But you weren't even aware. Like it was just you had to go back and be like, wait a minute, did I just steal this from? Which is great because it had an effect on you, but not, it's not like you were like, what can I use to make this work? It's the sort of the definitive text for what you were trying to get across.
Well, anybody who knows me will know that I watch pretty much the same movies over and over again.
Mhm.
It's something I enjoy doing. Godfather, Star Wars. I'll watch The
Mhm.
Fugitive if it's on all the time, and
Mhm.
I like watching these things and seeing the little intricate things that they do and how they make these 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 seemingly minor things masterpieces. I find that fascinating, and I found it fascinating in The Fugitive. He just jumped. Harrison Ford just jumped off the bridge. He's swimming in the water. He's overwhelmed. He's being accused of a terrible crime. What's he going to do? Well, I'm going to take a nap in the bushes and try to recollect myself. And while that's happening, his direction for the rest of the movie is sort of spelled out to him in this dream.
Mhm.
And that concept subconsciously, I guess, got into me while I was trying to figure out that opening. And that's what I sort of was like, I think this is what we should do. And I put it together. I told the producers afterwards what I did. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't mean to, but this is what happened." And it obviously stuck.
You find that man.
You
That's
find that man, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I've
And
watched
that's
it.
exactly what I did with Ray having his fever dream. He says, where are you, Manny? And we echo it out, and it's that dictates the rest of that episode,
Mhm.
and he has to find Manny.
Well, these are the influences, and people are either using them knowingly and paying tribute, or they're just under their skin. They don't even realize what they've done, but it's these things are in there. We have three small clips from Dope Thief. Be happy to screen them and we can talk about them. All right, well, let's go and look at this clip from episode 3.
You listen to me now. I have to cleanse my soul. It's important for me. I'm getting married.
I hear you, and I get that. But I'm telling you, man, that whatever you waiting for, it's not happening, okay? So we need to go right now.
Crazy here? How many different ways do we have to go to hell, Ray?
Look, right now we in this together, Manny. Me and you. Now, look, I promise you that I will drop you off back here, but I need you to go with me right now.
This is a nightmare.
What do you want me to
I'm
do?
not going.
I
Okay,
need you to go,
stop doing
man.
this. Don't make this here.
I'm going to come on, man.
Stop it doing
I'm not
this.
doing this.
I'm getting-
Here, I'll get right down on my knees right now. Oh, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I ask that my best friend will come. Thank you, Jesus.
They must have been it's been so much fun cutting the two of them. Their dynamic seems so great.
So that scene was really complicated to cut. It was much longer, as all the scenes were. There was
Mhm.
so much subtext happening between the two of them. Ray is trying to find Manny. Manny has terrible guilt for where they are in the point of the series. They've had to kill some people. They're being hunted by the people they stole from, and Manny is struggling with where he is, and he's also relapsed, and that's not helping his situation much better either. Ray is trying to figure out a way to get themselves out of this mess, and his his uh, his confidant and partner son has hooked him up with this enforcer, I guess, of the area who runs around wearing an Eagles t-shirt, which I had mixed feelings about, but he's not a good guy. He was a wonderful actor, terrific Cyrus, terrific actor. He captivated that character perfectly. And he's trying to tell Ray's trying to tell Manny, we got to go. We have to meet this guy. We're going to get out of it. We're going to do this, and we're going to get ourselves out of this mess. I'll let you guys see what happens. Obviously, it's going to be bad, and but he's trying to reason to him in a church, which I thought was fascinating. Again, I looked at the call sheet. I wanted to see where this church was.
Yeah, where was this?
It was on Walnut near Jefferson Hospital. So it was pretty interesting. When the scene opens up, Ray comes into the church, and he sees the holy water, and because he's running around doing all these things up to this point. He sticks his hands in the holy water and uses it to like cool the back of his neck. These are all things that Brian just added to
Yeah.
the character, and it was just layers of adding to this character, and that's sort of how these ad libs, and also what was written into the show, levity into these discussions, because it gave peaks and valleys, it gave ebbs and flows to very high intensity conversations, and that's sort of how in real life sometimes these conversations go, and that was important to Peter to portray. A little side note: when the sequence ends and Manny charges out of the church, and because Ray is making a scene. He's using foul language in a holy place, and he leaves. Ray stands up and looks up at the ceiling and says, "Thank you, Jesus." That's a total ad lib, and I thought, wow, that's such a great period to an intense scene like this, and
Yeah, no,
it
it's
was
great. Like to
phenomenal.
have smart actors bring the right stuff to it. It's like, and I don't want to say it's as good as a a non-prepared actor bringing bad ideas.
Yeah.
I've seen both in the footage, and it's like, it's very hard to work with the latter and very joyful to work with the former, because like you just like they're plugged in,
Yeah.
right? Like when everybody's plugged in, you get stuff like that. And it seems like this was rich with those sorts of moments.
Well, also what I found fascinating was how they utilized their face in quiet moments. Yeah, how they were studying each other. They were deeply into what they were doing in the moment, both these actors. And the challenge for me as an editor is because sometimes when you're cutting a scene, you just want to cut, 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 cut. And on a show like this and shows that I'm working on recently, my instinct now is when I start feeling like cut, make an edit. Why am I making that edit? What's the reasoning for that? Am I doing it just because, which is a terrible reason,
Mhm.
or am I making an edit because I want to say something? So in a sequence like the church where Ray is studying Manny and he's looking at him, my instinct was not to cut at times. Let these moments linger. Let's stay on someone's face to hear, to see them process what they're saying, what the other person's saying, or what they just said. And I found that more rewarding for the scenes, and it said a lot more for what I was trying to say, and I think ultimately what the director and producers were trying to say.
Oh, that's great. Especially whenever, yeah, like they look at that and they say this makes sense, right? You come in and screen it for everyone, and it's just your read is the right read. Or I mean, look, you were saying like there's so many ways this could have gone, but this interpretation is like it's mining as much out of this as you possibly can, right?
Yes, and if you also look at the construction of that scene, you'll see that just about every basic film school rule was broken, uh, which I always find fascinating. If you can do something like that and tell a scene that makes sense and not just makes sense, but has emotional resonance, you care about what's happening to these two people, you're deeply invested as an audience. Uh, that to me is very very interesting storytelling, and because if you're invested as an audience, you don't think about those things. You don't care that we crossed the line numerous times and we're on this person's face on one side of the line and the other person's face on this other side, or you're
Mhm.
one side of the church. It's immaterial because the story and their acting is carrying everything.
Right. And if they're paying attention to that, there's bigger problems, right?
If
Like,
you start looking at, and that's what I always say, if you start looking at those things, then there's other issues that you have.
yeah. I remember watching, there's some crazy shit in Goodfellas. I mean, Scorsese does it all the time. It's just like
Yeah.
he knows you're locked in, and Velma knows it too. Like they just have the ability to say, either that or like it's so brazen where they're like, we're just gonna do this because
Yeah.
that's not what it's about. And you're either on the bus or not.
It's funny you bring up Scorsese because I definitely thought about their work when putting all my episodes of the show together, and their work, and then also the movie American Hustle. American
Mhm.
Hustle, you could say, is very Scorsese-esque
Sure.
in terms of the editing, in terms of the pace, and how they tell story. And we had a number in episode 7, Mussolini. We had a number of montages. A number of months now have passed since the heist. we have to reorient because we're doing a time jump. We have to sort of orient our audience. Where are where are the main characters at? Where's Ray? Where's Manny? Where's Mina? And we did that through montage. And I definitely stole probably a little more from American Hustle, which was a Scorsese, I would say a Scorsese influence, and to address those montages and tell the story poetically, but also fundamental to the story, and making sure story was king. I didn't want it to become a music video. And the joke that we had, me and my assistant, who's from South Jersey, so basically Philadelphia, is that at times we were making Rocky IV. This was our Rocky IV, which I love. Don't get me wrong, I love these movies.
Why four?
But
I was just talking about that literally yesterday. A friend of mine is like, that's my favorite one by far. I don't know why, but I always go to Drago. But why you're making Rocky IV, meaning you're making a training sequence type of.
well, you have training sequences. There's so much montage in that movie. I haven't watched the director's cut he released a few years ago. I'm sure there's a lot more story that got truncated into montage to make that movie what it ultimately became. I think that movie is a terrific movie. I love that. I love all the Rocky movies, but that one is just a lot of fun. It's a great movie, but it's also a great model for utilizing montage. I'd say it's right on the cusp of being a music video at times versus a montage that's telling story. And I think it does it very effectively because you're sort of into Rocky's mindset, what's going on. You know, he's just lost his friend, or he has to fight this opposing foe. Adrian doesn't support him. You know, all those things. He's going to Russia, and he has to train with the communists, and all that stuff.
Drag this log up this mountain.
Yeah, and he's Drago's has the state of the art training equipment. And he's using rocks. It's just an interesting way of telling that story. And we had the Mina training montage in Mussolini. And what we wanted to do was tell her story. Where is she? What happened to her? How is she going to overcome the events that have led her to where she's at? She trusted her partner who duped her, and she loved him. And he tricked her. He was very corrupt, and she followed his lead because she trusted him, and she's now paying the price. But she's deep down inside she was a good agent, and she has to solve this for her own redemption. And that was I think that was important to her. So we utilized that in episode 7 for her. We used it in I think the next scene you're going to show. There's a sequence with Ray talking to Teresa in the hospital. We're doing a time jump. What's happened to Ray since he's been in the hospital? Well, he obviously didn't want to go to the hospital because he's going to be arrested, and he's trying to ride out the wounds that he's experiencing, which are pretty mortal or pretty fatal at that point. So now we have to time jump all that stuff. Well, it's more interesting to show that the agents are watching over them. And in this portion of their conversation that we're about to see, it's surrounded by all kinds of montages of the agents watching them. They're being investigated. They're being spied on. And while this is all happening, we have this deeply emotional sequence between these two, Kate McGrew, who plays Teresa, and Brian Tyree, who plays Ray, which powerhouse performances.
Let's take a look.
You've never read your father's rap sheet?
No, don't give me more than I can carry right now, Ma.
I wasn't his girlfriend. I was his girl. His favorite girl.
I don't need to know all this right now.
Grow up. Yes, you do. I was a kid. I needed money. I was around anyway. Who cares?
Who cares?
Love isn't always in royal courts, Raymond. Sometimes it grows in the mud.
No.
You needed me, I needed you. I got out of the life and we took care of each other. If that isn't family, then what the hell is?
You come to this with preconceived notions of who everybody is, and then they keep surprising you. And then he's there with his mother.
She sort of, because of his upbringing, because of what happened to his father, played by Ving Rhames, as a child, uh, she took him in, and he has a deep love for her. She was, and all the people, most of the people of his life, she was the one that really loved him and cared for him and watched over him. And now he's protective over her. So they had a deep love. They really did care for each other, and it's a very sweet story between the two of them, especially for the situation that they're in. There, she's it. We only could see a small portion of that scene, but she's actually wearing a wire in that sequence, and she's trying to tell him as the sequence progresses. She's trying to tell Ray, I'm wearing a wire, and she's doing it in a way that's very effective. And it was just a wonderful scene because there was a lot of eyes on them. There was a lot of pressure being applied to both of them in that moment. And in the midst of all that, they had this quick exchange of this deeply emotional moment.
What was that movie that just came out where they're texting each other and holding phones to indicate that they're being monitored? It was a Richard Linklater movie.
Oh yes, yes, yeah. I forget the name, but yes, I saw
It was
that.
goofy. I mean, it wasn't like, it was fun to watch, but it was like cotton
Yeah.
candy compared to
Yeah.
this. But an interesting way to solve that problem.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
what we did use in Dope Thief, text messaging a lot. Mina, played by Marin Ireland, in the pilot, she's undercover, which we don't know at the time, and she gets shot. She gets in the shootout in the house. She gets shot in the neck and damages her vocal cords. So that's her arc. That's her journey for the show. So as the episodes are progressing and she's learning about how much she was wrong about, and she has this deep anger for Jack, but she also has a love for him. But now she has to figure out who Ray is, and she has to save her own skin here, and she wants to be redeemed, but she didn't have a voice for a good portion of the series. So how do you tell all of that? Well, she's just an incredible actress. Her eyes are so effective in telling you everything you needed to know of how she was feeling, and anger, frustration, sadness, depression, just all that. But then sometimes we would have to have a little bit more detailed conversations when she was talking to Nader about what she thought was what needed to happen, the questions she was posing to progress the story moving forward. So some of the conventions we would use would be text messaging, and she would text, and the bubble would pop up on screen, or we had subtitles on screen to show us, and that was also an effective way to tell that story. And then also it allowed for some comedic moments. I didn't have a chance. I didn't cut the scene, but when she was, I think in episode 2, when she's in the hospital and she's talking to Nader about what's happened, and she's using a lot of foul language, and she's writing one word and it's coming up as duck, and everything was ducking, and
right.
it added a little. It added some levity to the moment, which was fun.
It's hard to, like, you have to acknowledge, like, a movie that doesn't acknowledge that everybody's texting each other all the time, or a show that like, you can't pretend that's not how people communicate. It's just, you have to figure out how to incorporate it into your story or set it where no one has service or a period piece. Like it's really unavoidable.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen it done really effectively, and you always hear like clickety clickety click, whatever it, you know, it's like as if everybody has the sound up when they're typing,
Yeah.
but like it's a, you know, hearing the clickety click on your when someone's texting is like hearing a heart monitor in a hospital. Right? It's like these are things that they're indicators. They may or may not be totally realistic, but you completely immediately understand what's going on.
Yeah, and it was a nice convention to use if we had to get ourselves, if we had to tell a little bit more complicated aspect of the story, it was a quick way to do that and
Mhm.
done effectively. And if you take the text screen, you put it on the image of what the person is doing, and you can see their reaction or their emotional moment of what they're writing, it became very effective to tell to to put subtext to what they were saying.
Right. So seeing somebody deciding,
Yeah,
right,
it was
deleting
a
and
really interesting way of
rewriting,
doing
and
it.
yeah, that's interesting. It's dramatic. Um, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Let's watch this third. This third clip is the one that I was like, are they? These can't be real guns. And then I'm like, it's Philly. Maybe they were, but let's watch this clip. Tell me how this was put together, and of course where, because like, you know, I'm sure this was you know, 5 miles from where we grew up.
Probably.
It seems really interesting to see her figuring things out as indicated by a short look up or over her shoulder, like I'm being watched. Like there's you really like there's a lot of and the thing is this is out of context for me, so I can't wait to watch it and really get a sense. But this is where you're catching up. Is this where you're filling in some blanks because she's piecing together what she knows, what she doesn't know, who's watching her and doesn't want it. I don't know. There's a lot. Seems like a lot going on in the sequence.
So this is a portion of a much bigger montage in episode 7 with Mina, and I'm incredibly proud of all these montages in that episode. This one in particular, I'm very proud of. We worked very hard to make sure we were telling the story we wanted to tell. We did correct some of the images you were seeing, like that flow chart where she was connecting all the main players to the alliance. Little trivia there: Richard Hughes, one of our producers, actually drew that on a piece of paper. We gave it to a visual effects artist in house, and we asked him to temp it for us, and he did that. Some of the mug shots were also we redid some of that with visual effects to tell the story that we wanted to tell. And this was her, at this point in episode 7, this is the penultimate episode of the series. Um, she's had an emotional journey of guilt. She was suicidal at one point. She's adjusting to this new way of living. She doesn't have a voice really anymore. She's a damaged agent, but all the agents that are working the case, uh, they all seem to think they know what to do, and she's been sort of sidelined a little bit, and she's like a paper pusher at this point, but she's covertly trying to figure out what's happening, and but she also has to regain her confidence and her strength as well, which is what we sort of did with the training, the gunfire, which, to answer your question, I think that gunfire was real, but we did enhance it with visual effects.
Mhm.
And I think all that was shot actually near the airport. Uh, and it's just a great sequence that I was very, very proud of, because it's intercutting a lot of it's intercutting a lot of different aspects of her life that really, one against another, if you look at cut for cut, doesn't always totally make sense. But the power of montage, if you look at it as a whole, it tells the whole story that she's looking for, that we're trying to tell.
Mhm.
And that to me is interesting. That's very interesting way of editing. One of the filmmakers that I'm always impressed with is Christopher Nolan. And I think his movies, they just have a wonderful rhythm. They're really well edited, all of them. And it's just, if you look at it, from my perspective of it, if you look at it, how they're put together, it's literally this scene, this is the point of the scene, and then we're out. There's no little transitions, or that just, let's get to the point of the scene and move on. And his films are long and they tell a lot of story, but it's done in such a uh, cohesive way with very, very powerful editing. And look at the movie The Dark Knight, when the Batmobile when the Batmobile blows up, and then Batman's riding the Bat Pod throughout Gotham City. There's a short little sequence there where he's driving from one section of the city to the next, and if you look at it cut for cut, he's never in the same location from twice. It's just different shots of different things. But as a whole, if you look at it, it makes perfect sense. And it's just a really interesting way of telling story in such a short amount of time. So I sort of utilized that concept when putting these sequences together, these montages in particular, because I didn't, like I said earlier, I didn't want this to become a music video. One of the things that we did when putting these scenes together, especially these Mina investigation montages, which was much more in the episode, had much more. There was more to it. She's meeting with her counselor to psychoanalyze her, to help her get over the trauma that she's experiencing. She's trying to do an investigation. She's trying to get to the issues at hand and solve this crime. And I found a piece of music from Trent Reznor's "Girl with the Dragon Tattoo" that I thought was terrific, and it actually said what I wanted to say. And again, talking about ripping off, I actually caught that movie not that long ago when I was watching some of those sequences, and I saw the cue that I used, and I went, "Huh, I guess I subconsciously ripped off that sequence as well."
It
But
doesn't count if you're not conscious of it. I think it's, you get away
I
with
think
it.
I get a pass.
They become definitive in a way. Like these
Yeah,
things that are playing in your head, like they're playing in your head for a reason, because they're strong examples of a thing. And when you think of how to express that thing, your mind goes to, like, I think I had read something where you're talking about, the escalation in the Godfather, where he, where Al Pacino, you know, executes the cop, and it, like, for the first
yeah.
time, and like the sound of the train, the slow moving in past the neon sign, like it's an engineered piece of filmmaking that is copied because for good reason,
So to speak of that, I, that moment where Michael Corleone shoots Sollozzo and the police captain, when he's sitting there at the table, and because this is the first time he's going to murder somebody,
Mhm.
let alone two people, two very high profile people. The anxiety and the tension that's building up into him, it's like an eruption. And what did they do to sort of tell us that? Well, his face obviously is telling you that his looks like his eyes are about to pop out of his sockets. But also they had sound in the background of
The
the
train
subway
yell, right?
rumbling, and
Mhm.
it's rumbling and it's intensing, and it's getting so intense to the point where he explodes and shoots the two guys. And then all the sound sort of drops out, and you just sort of hear the people's reactions. You hear the gunfire. So that concept I used as well in episode 4, right before the big quarry shootout sequence. Ray is there with Cyrus, the white supremacist. They're seeing the bikers, and Cyrus says, "You know what? We're not gonna wait for some. We're gonna start this battle now," which was not what Ray and Manny thought was going to happen. They thought they were on a surveillance mission, and suddenly this scene took a really dark turn. And Ray's begging them not to do this, and he realizes that he's trapped. He can't get himself out of the situation, and their situation is now just becoming even worse. And he steps to the edge of the quarry just before all hell breaks loose, and he looks up and he sees these vultures flying over his head, which was something that the director Marcellus Said saw in the moment, shot all this footage, and said, I don't know where we would use this, but this seems really cool. Try to figure out a way to do it." And what became very abundantly clear to me was that this is a great metaphor to show what is happening to Ray's life. And to go back to The Godfather, what we did is we were escalating the score. We were constantly upping it to the point where Cyrus throws the Molotov cocktail into the quarry to start the battle. And from that point on, all music was gone. And we just kept everything rooted in reality. The eruption, just like Michael Corleone, has now happened, and now we're in it. And it's a powerful technique that from The Godfather, which again is a favorite movie of mine, that I did steal from, or let's say I borrowed. I borrowed.
It's always good to, I mean, Norm Holland, I don't know if you remember him. He wrote the Film Editing Room Handbook when everything was filmed. Everyone had one. And he also wrote a book called The Lean Forward Moment. And he talks about that particular moment specifically as you're slowly moving in and the train slowly building up in the intensity in his eyes. There is a neon sign behind out of focus in the background. And at the moment it disappears out of frame, something about the frame changes. And that's the moment. It's almost like the sunset.
Yeah.
And once it's over the horizon and it's all darkness, the next thing can happen. And it's a really interesting analysis. He does it way better than I'm doing it right now. I mean, and sort of like the overpronounced version is like when Kylo Ren is about to maybe not kill Han Solo, but the sun goes behind the thing. And it's like, oh shit, that's not good, right? Like it's very pronounced there.
It's the switch. The switch has been turned.
Right.
Michael Corleone, if you look at Godfather, Michael Corleone to that point was a war hero. Marlon Brando didn't want that life for him. He wanted him to be a legitimate guy. He wanted him to be a senator or somebody of importance. And being involved in the mafia was not what was planned for him. And it all gets thrown out the window in that moment. And he becomes ultimately the Godfather.
Yeah, no, that's the fulcrum of the whole movie.
Yeah.
I gotta watch that again. My kids are old enough now that they could probably get through something. It's so, you know what I mean? It's like the pacing of it is so, by today's standards, so like deliberate. I worry to show them that. But I did show my 14-year-old Annie Hall, and he got through it fine. He was like, he was like, actually, I loved seeing New York. I loved looking at all these places that I recognized, and I get the movie, but I don't think the movie was necessarily his thing. We could talk forever. I'm sure if you'd like to come back, I would love to do a part 2, but it's, I also feel like we should have mercy on our audience. It's been 90 minutes. And I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and just sharing such a deep appreciation and understanding for craft. I mean, it just must make doing your job so gratifying and a lot of fun. Like you go to work and you're like, how do I make this, the best thing it can be, and that's.
It's fun. It's, you think about all the events that have led you to where you are. And, I'll end on this. I was, like I said, I was an art student growing up, But one of the things that was I found very valuable was that my father or my parents would take me to the movies all the time. I would
Mhm.
see just about everything, I guess within reason. But my father would let me watch just about anything, horror, crime, action, um, and he really embraced and helped me shape my creative language that I applied to all my aspects of the different arts that I participated in. And he was both my parents were very supportive and encouraging, and to have those experiences really shaped me. And we laugh about it now because I think the response from other parents today might not have been the same
Mhm.
for some of the movies he took me to, but it really helped shape who I became.
Yeah, no, we just talked to someone who had the same thing. It was like they really gave credit to parents who had a reverence for for film and they
Yeah,
helped expose them to good stories that really stuck with them. All I can do is tell my kids and their friends like lights off, phones off.
yeah,
Like I'm not showing this to you so you can like do five other things. Like we're watching
yeah,
this to experience it and try, like it's different now.
yeah.
You must have been going to the 309 cinema a lot.
I went to the 309 Cinema a lot, the Regal in Huntington Valley. Yeah, I
Mhm.
went to a lot of those, a
Yeah.
lot of those theaters, many nights.
I was lucky enough to be there was a festival or something at the Ambler at that theater in the Ambler. It's an art house theater
Yes,
now.
yes,
And
yes.
I saw that The Revenant was playing at 309. And so we were giving an award out to somebody. And then the guy I was with, I was like, I think we gotta just go. And we pulled up because it's like you don't see movies big anymore. And it was like, no, if there's a movie I want to see big, it's that one. And
Yeah,
boy, what a reward. We were like
yeah,
three people in the whole theater and I didn't. It was like I was pinned the entire time. It was just a nice experience to go back and see something big for a change.
yeah. I have deep memories of seeing at the 309 theater, Saving Private Ryan opening night. That was the thing. Opening night. I'd always go opening night. That was my deal.
Hmm.
So opening night, seeing Private Ryan, or the movie Heat, or and
Sure.
stuff like that. And back then you sort of would know what these movies are about if you maybe read a review here or
Hmm.
there, or the internet was
Premiere
still
Magazine or something.
yeah, Premiere Magazine. My father would always get Entertainment Weekly every Friday. And I remember he'd come into the house and he would literally he would throw it across the kitchen to me because he knew I would love to read it. And it was
Hmm.
something that I would read the magazine. Oh, what's the new movie coming out, and stuff like that. Or my father coming home one day and say, "Hey, somebody at work told me about this movie called Pulp Fiction. We should see it tonight. What do you think?" It was opening night, and I went, "Yeah, I don't know anything about it." And you see it, and you're just like, it. You have these moments in
Hmm.
these formative moments that have such a profound effect on you, and you don't realize it while it's happening, but you're
Hmm.
just like, I don't believe what I'm looking at. I don't believe what is happening right now. Yes, the movie's violent. Yes, the movie has terrible language and what stuff. But from a structural point of view of telling a story, it is such a groundbreaking way
Hmm.
of effectively telling a story like that. And it really does shape you, and you don't forget these moments.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I saw Reservoir Dogs down at the Ritz, cold, didn't know
Yeah.
anything about it, and I was like, I was a different person when I left the theater.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
just was
It's
like
kind of
I've never seen anything like, things like it. I mean, granted, it owes a lot to what City on Fire. If I had been that deep into cinema, I would have known. But like at the time, it was like, holy shit! Like there's
well.
the before that movie and after that movie.
There's before the movie and after. Like for me, Pulp Fiction was such a. I got, as you could, I guess you could say, I was sucker punched. I was so unprepared for what I was walking
Hmm.
into, and again, it had such a profound effect on me. So the next day, I walked over to the local video store, and you tell that was sort of my link to the outside world when it came to film. And you would ask the people behind the counter, well, I just saw this movie. What do you recommend? They go, oh, well, then you should watch Reservoir Dogs. You should watch Stanley Kubrick's The Killers. And you should watch this. And you should take a deep dive down Cronenberg and see these things. And you start seeing the movies that influenced Tarantino. Harvey Keitel in, I think, The Americans. And you start seeing, you watch these movies and you can sort of see the aspects of what was utilized to form what ultimately became, Pulp Fiction, or what became Private Ryan, or Heat, things of that nature. And it's just that was my key to the outside world. And it was just a great way of experiencing these things.
Maybe it was at Maple Glen Video. That was my
So there was a video store in Drescher that I would go to. That was the one I would walk to. Maple Glen Video was a little bit more. I could get there. I'd have to ride my bike to it. And the draw about Maple Glen Video was if you got there at certain times of the month, they would take the posters down. And if you were in with them, which at times I sort of was, they would give you the posters.
That's awesome.
That was pretty cool. And then I'd have to ride my bike another 30 minutes down some busy streets with holding the posters in my hand, and hopefully I didn't drop one.
Nice. Well, I guess I love the idea that some of these movies sort of felt like they dropped out of the sky, because out of context, like once you contextualize them, it's even a richer experience to watch Reservoir Dogs and Kubrick and Cronenberg and see where you sort of see the evolution, where they come from. But there are things about maybe being that age and being new to the experience that these movies just felt like they came out of the sky, and they're huge experiences.
They're just, every one of these experiences are just, for me, when you have those moments, which you don't always have, but when you do have them, they're profound. And it's filmmaking films have such an effect on you when they do that. And they shape who you become and how you look at things. And for someone like me who ultimately pursued a film career, I think about those moments all the time, and then you go, well, now I'm here doing it. And it's a cool feeling.
You're going to be responsible for that for someone else, which is super cool, right? It's like,
I hope so.
You already have, I would imagine. There's some of that where people are like, they watch a show or some film and they're like, I don't even understand how that happened. Where I just feel it so deeply. I'm sure of it. But
thank you.
Yeah. And so my question, there's a couple of questions where it's like, oh, well, I don't want to ask the typical one, but I did because of Maple Glen. I've been reading all about Verona's, which is the new, one of these hot cheesesteaks. So you're from Philly. What's your go-to? What's your favorite cheesesteak? It could be Philly or Jersey, because I go to South Jersey for some of this too. So
Verona's was after my time living there. I haven't been to Verona. I know all about it. I would love to. I'm sure it's amazing. My two go-to places would be, there was a place in Bluebell called Pudge's.
Yeah, sure.
And I grew up with that place, and giant cheesesteaks, giant hoagies, and was the owner of the place was actually he went by the name Pudge. So that would have been the place I would go to, and then in the Northeast Philly there was a place called Steve's Princess Steaks. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
So those would be my two. And then you can't go wrong with Wawa. Wawa is always amazing.
Oh my God. And not pizza. Don't get their pizza. I had that, and that was I'll never be able to undo that error.
I never did that. I just stick with hoagies and Wawa.
Yeah. No. I did Verona. I work out in Philly every Wednesday in Warminster, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I was like, I got to try this Verona's thing. Yeah. And it was had made itself too soggy by the time I got it back to my office. And then I brought it home, put it in an air fryer for 5 minutes for my son, because I can't eat the whole thing. And he was like, this might be the best, because we do cheesesteak tours, me and that we go to like all the places just to and while I still am young enough to not do permanent damage to myself. But he really liked it. So if you're ever back, it's worth eating it there, I would say, is the way
Yes.
to go.
Yeah.
But
Well, I know exactly where it is. Actually, I think where Verona's is now. I think, isn't that where Maple Glen Video used to
it
be?
seems pretty much like exactly
Yeah.
where it was. I don't know, it's
Yeah.
been a long time because I haven't lived there in a long time, but I grew up on like Sherrod Drive in that sort of development off of Fort Washington.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure we were probably a bike ride distance
I'm
from one another.
positive of it. Yeah. Small world.
Yeah, no, it's great. And thank you so much for a really to kind of deep dive in a lovely conversation too. So
Likewise. Thank you. It's
and
been
I'm
a
glad I
pleasure.
got to have it all to myself, because I usually have to share it with Rafi and Jason and other people, but I got to hog this one and go off into my stupid tangents where I always get made fun of by these guys. I get like Jason eye rolling like cheesesteaks, man. Really? No one stops me this time.
Yeah. Oh, I could talk about that all day. No problem.
All right. Well, perhaps if you look, I'm sure there'll be an occasion to talk again, and would love to have you back for that. And I guarantee, I at least promise that I'll keep it to under an hour.
No problem. No problem at all. I'd love to talk again in the future.
All right, great. So would I. And of course, we got to say go Birds. Can't.
Go Birds, and go Phillies.
Yeah, exactly. So till next time, have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for coming in and sitting down and talk to us.
Likewise. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.